That's the best I've got, sadly. Okay, so welcome, and thank you very much for coming today. I have had a really fun time talking with a lot of you guys about these uncomfortable compensation conversations. I truly enjoy that. I want to start out by saying thanks to one of our partners, Office Vibe. In some of Mike's keynote conversations this morning with Mattel and Amorous and Patagonia, almost every person brought up engagement. Office Vibe has an experience for engagement. We're actually a customer of Office Vibe, and we believe a lot in it, and actually is a good combo to compensation. So I want to say thanks again to Mike and the team this morning for doing that work. That was really great. And then also to all of the members of CAB. We do a customer advisory board every year. We spent a full day on it yesterday. We got a lot of very good, candid feedback, and that input directly goes towards shaping our roadmap. Okay, my name is Dave Smith. I'm the Chief Product Officer of PayScale. The team's going to join me to do some live demos. We're going to talk about some beta opportunities, and we'll also talk about our plans for 2019. Before I do that, I am a giant Disney nerd, huge nerd. We've done all kinds of things, parks, cruises, travel adventures, et cetera. Sometimes it's hard to plan for those things, and there was a time 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, that we actually came here and we were getting ready to go to Epcot Center, and I was trying to figure out what the experience for the family was going to be the next day. So I'm on the website late at night just doing panic buying. I'm not even sure really what I bought. I wish this were not true. It's completely 100% true. So then we show up, and it turns out that I purchased the Around the World Princess experience, but I have a son. You literally can't make this up. Here's what, in my family, we refer to this as the 3 stages of submitting to a princess. Like, here he's just like, now what is this again? Here, this is just pure goofy, and then submission followed by Snow White's death grip. All right, that killed it. Great. Super happy. All right, let's get started on the real talk. I think that we're at an interesting point in history, and we play a unique role as compensation experts supporting our companies. And so I want to spend a little bit of time sort of reflecting on that. What I'm going to use to talk about that is compensation data and game theory, just a few light topics. There was an economist named Thomas Schelling in the 40s and 50s who was famous for his ideas that shaped the Cold War. He spent a huge amount of time analyzing and watching negotiations happen in real time. And he noticed that a lot of negotiations, especially those where there are shifting power dynamics, a focal point will develop. And usually it's around a credible threat. That becomes the crux of getting a deal done or not getting a deal done. And remember, this is about the Cold War and a bunch of other things that were very heavy and very risk intensive. The cost of making a mistake is quite large. So he noticed 3 things. The first thing he noticed was that these conversations and focal points are based on expectations. So I expect that you expect that I expect, and those interactions shape our future expectations. And it's sort of weird. It also is really what happens, and he actually modeled it out. And his work in the 40s and 50s was actually the beginning of what became game theory. Those are all probabilities that can be calculated and pushed out. The second one is that these are social. They always come about during times of economic or social change. And during that time, people get together and they talk about it, which propagates those things a little bit farther. The third thing, and probably the most interesting thing, is we don't need facts to have this happen. They could be either facts or myths. The only thing that has to be true is people need to be able to believe it could possibly be true. So it turns out Schelling also studied compensation, more so unions, but also at the time in the 40s and 50s, that was just a different economic time than we have today. And a lot of what was going on then actually ended up shaping the industry that we're in today. There was wage suppression. So companies had an overwhelming advantage in terms of salary information. And because of World War II and the Depression before that, people were just happy to have a job. Also, unless you were in union, you didn't really talk about pay. Today, though, almost no one really has at the top of their list of concerns legal concerns. 100% of the time, year after year, for the last 6 or 7 years, the 2 key issues have been attraction and retention. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about what are the comp focal points when it comes to attraction and retention. The first one is data. This was touched on earlier today, but so today companies don't have an overwhelming data advantage, and in fact I could argue that employees do. If you look at the compensation-related websites today, they get about 100 million unique visitors in the United States alone. Our site gets between, depending on what's going on the time of the year, somewhere between 8 and 12 million unique visitors a month. And the information doesn't cost anything. It's totally free. They can do it as often as they want. There are some potential quality issues, not with our site, but with a bunch of other sites. By the way, I should mention, we're the only company that gathers this compensation data from a crowdsourced mechanism and actually monetizes that through packaging it into software that we sell to companies to help them pay their employees. Everybody else focuses on that as an advertising model, or it's one more added benefit to get more traffic to come to their site. So we're the only ones that do that. There are definite issues with people pricing themselves versus pricing the job, and we know that there's a difference, and a lot of employees don't know that there's a difference. But you know what? They don't care. Meanwhile, our data is very expensive, and it's unwieldy and very difficult to use, especially to get it to used in day-to-day operations by employees and managers. It's a really hard thing to get out of the comp department and sort of spread throughout the company. We've done some math in the last year and a half or so, and we know that there's about $1 billion spent on this compensation data in the United States alone on an annual basis. And it's not likely that that's going to change much. In fact, if anything, it's going to continue to go up. And then you add to that the thousands of hours that we all have to spend managing that data. You know, it's just cumbersome. It's going to change. Most of what we're going to talk about today is a PayScale platform and how we're going to help you do that. But even when you do that, you still have these other issues related to attraction and retention. So one of them is social. I won't spend a huge amount of time here. I feel like we've beaten this drum quite a bit, rightfully so. So people today are not encumbered by sharing salary information. It happens all the time. Who here remembers the Google situation with the Google spreadsheets? Really, not many. Okay, so a cool thing about Google spreadsheets is that they're easily shareable with links, and they can be updated in real time by many people at the same time. You just got to think about that for a second. And so there was a Google engineer, a woman, who created a spreadsheet, sent it to her fellow employees, and just said, hey, how about if we all share each other's pay information? That was in 2015. Sure, yeah, go ahead. It's going to happen. We can't really act like it's not going to happen anymore. I would never have done that. That's just not my thing, super uncomfortable, but I have a lot of employees, and a lot of them do it, this kind of thing, all the time. And my only point with this is the world has changed. The next one is fairness. So women earn less than men. That has actually been true for as long as we've had the data to prove that it's true. But for some reason, right now, we've all decided it's actually something we're probably going to address, which I think is really just absolutely awesome and great. So if you're working on inequity at your company, can you clap your hands? All right, I don't know where that is in the decibel level, but next year we're going to be about 4x that. So we feel very passionately and strongly about this equity issue. We're going to have some stuff that we're going to show you a little bit on some ways that you can address this. Some folks would say that fairness isn't really a central issue. It's related but not material to attraction and retention. What we would actually say is that it is table stakes, and it's certainly becoming table stakes right now. Mike showed that Salesforce video earlier, which the more that kind of information gets out in the market, the more that those expectations get recreated, the more that you now have to have these discussions and do something about it. We're at a point now I don't think we can have a choice. All right, so what is this new comp game? In a way, I don't think the rules have changed, to be honest with you. These words here, everybody is familiar with. We've been talking about them literally for decades. I think the thing that has changed is the pace, the speed has dramatically increased, and then also the tactics that people use. So let's just say that you have an employee who goes to her manager for pay information. What comp focal points is she likely to use? One of them is the internal equity issue. Susie in marketing makes $110,000. I'm way more experienced than her, therefore I should be earning more than her. Or, God forbid, tell me again how much men in this position make, and let's have that conversation. Another one is market data. We've already talked about that. It's free, it's easy. They don't care that it's the same data as yours. They just want to force a conversation. But the ultimate one is probably another offer. So getting an actual offer from a competing company, this, our economist friend Schelling would give 2 giant thumbs up. There's nothing more credible than an actual offer that you have to respond to. What usually happens in this situation is a huge amount of soul searching. Manager gets HR or comp involved. go back and forth, and then you sort of do some bargaining, and then you settle on something, sort of splitting the difference right in between. And hopefully that's a good outcome, but we're not really sure sometimes if it is a good outcome. Likely what has happened, though, is you probably have created a compression issue. It's possible you've had to create some unicorn job for this unique person that didn't exist before, that you now have to relate to every single other job at the company. Multiply that conversation times the number of employees you have. You're doing this thousands of times a year. What's another thing that companies can do to address this issue? One is to create an overwhelming sort of shield. I talked about the overwhelming threat. Another overwhelming shield is the perfect example of the stuff that Salesforce was doing. So if you care about fairness and equity, Salesforce is the place for you, especially if you're a woman. I don't doubt that their motives are true and genuine. I also guarantee you they did the math. They're going to spend $3 million or whatever it ended up being. They're going to do that amount every year. They have 30,000 employees. They're growing like crazy. And they're literally out of options to be able to recruit and retain people. So I'm certain they viewed this as an investment that was going to pay off. And I think that's going to happen more and more and more. And by the way, as more and more people are more vocal about it because it starts working, it's going to speed up your need to react to it. That's just kind of how this works. By the way, does it get any more credible than 60 Minutes? I mean, they invented the hidden camera. Maybe Oprah, but by the way, she reports for 60 Minutes now. Here's another way to do it, and this is a conversation from the employee's perspective.
I wanted a promotion this year, and I didn't get it. That's fine. My boss handled it so gracefully. She said, look, this year we're decoupling pay and bonus and compensation. I can't change your title because the organization doesn't need another person at the next title now. But you have been fantastic this year. Here's a pay and bonus increase that makes sense for you. And it was generous and it was awesome. But it took the sting out of the whole title coupling. I think in the past, I would have been really frustrated that the title didn't go up. That means I'm not rewarded. But she was able to decouple it really effectively, and so it felt fine.
So there's a couple things about that. That was obviously a difficult, uncomfortable conversation that clearly had a positive outcome. The employee got some context, et cetera. Despite what Victor said, I don't think he actually was fine. His face didn't say I'm super jazzed about this thing. But this will be my last pun, I hope. Much like Jesse in Toy Story 2, somehow Victor found a way to get around it. Okay. So let's talk about how we're going to win at the new game. I think fundamentally communication is the core issue. We based a lot of our product strategy on some work that the Corporate Executive Board did in 2006 around the value of communication. And it turns out it's the single largest lever you can pull to drive the perception of fairness. It's 68%. Meanwhile, the actual plan design itself, the ranges, the grades, the targets, the medians, all the stuff we talk about, that only drives a little bit less than a third. The second is technology, which I've talked about and we'll spend more time talking about. And for us in particular, this is the PayScale platform. We are very committed to continue to make this easier for you to get your data, to access your data, to match your data, and to dramatically reduce the amount of administration it takes to manage that on an ongoing basis. The third, which we talked about there, was manager enablement. So it turns out that 98% of employees go directly to their manager as the first place you want to get pay information, not their friends, not their family, not even their coworkers. And we're missing the opportunity by not leveraging that. That organically is already happening. So what can we do as a company, product-wise, to enable your managers to have better conversations which lead to better outcomes? Okay. So the rest of the talk, we're going to talk about three things, and some folks are going to join me. I'm going to have Barnaby and Heather come up and help talk about the platform itself. We're going to have Chris and Alex talk about our HR and comp experiences. And then finally, we'll end with Carica, Leslie, who will talk about our team products. So with that, I would like to welcome Barnaby Dorfman.
Hey, everybody.
Barnaby's our chief engineering officer. He has about 100 folks that report to him that are data scientists, software developers, engineers, all kinds of technical folks, and I sit with them on floor 3, and they barely tolerate me. So we shifted to a platform strategy in 2017. and we were a product-centric strategy. The product-centric strategy says that we have these separate experiences for customers. They're not in any way connected, and that once a customer decides they're going to purchase this experience, they get access to all the features within that experience, and there's not a lot of flexibility there. A platform experience does a lot more powerful things. One of them is participation. Two really great examples of this are Helix data science, which Barnaby's going to talk about in a second, and another one is some of our data as a service products, specifically company-sourced data. The notion I would have you take away with that is the more people that use and participate, the better the benefit for everybody else involved. And the second two areas are flexibility and choice. So we did a huge amount of research noticing that not all customers use all the features in every product, despite the fact that that's what I would love for everybody to do. It turns out people don't care about it as much as I do. And so we undertook actually a pretty rigorous study, a quantitative and qualitative study to go figure out preferences of customers. What it boiled down to was that folks had a desire to have a core experience, which was data in multiple different forms, a way to price and match jobs, strategy and structure, and some light, reporting. After that, they wanted to be able to pick and choose features that made the most sense for them given their business situation. So not everybody wanted to access some of the job collaboration or the team pay features. Not everybody wanted to access survey management if you were an Insight Lab. Curiously, or maybe not so, we actually got it fairly right in market pay, that most people were satisfied that those were the right bucket of features. So in 2019, we will start rolling out more choice within the platform so that you can pick and choose experiences that matter to you the most. All right, let's take a deep dive on the platform, and you and I can just sort of talk about this a little bit.
Sure.
So we have some technologies that we refer to as reusable components. You want to talk about those?
Sure. So some examples of reusable components would be some of the elements of the front end, the way things slide out. I would say some of the other dimensions of, say, analytics and reporting. And this really is a shift from the way that we were doing things before. Up until a few years ago, we had hundreds of customers, and in the last few years, we've grown, and I think we just passed 7,000 customers, and we've also increased in the average size of the customer. We have close to half the Fortune 500 now. And so, in many ways, what we've done is move from building, maintaining, managing a small apartment building to building a city, as a way of thinking about it. And some of these reusable components are like prefabricated building materials, components, and mass merchandised and produced appliances that allow us to put things together pretty quickly and also customize and configure them eventually really down to the individual customer level. And that's, it's been a big investment, and it's quite a change relative to the way we did things before.
I would say we're probably about 50% of the way through this, and so we'll talk about that a little more. You want to talk about microservices a little bit? Sure.
So web services, microservices is a way of connecting those things. It's basically utilities. You can almost think of it as being similar to the electric grid. So in our world, it would be things like search technology, identity and security, a number of services that get used in pretty much every application, but in slightly different ways. And it's similar to the way that, say, when Edison built the first electric grid, it was really for just electric lights. He had no idea that we would eventually have computers to connect to that.
Cool. And it's these first two components that allow us to do this platform plus concept to allow you to give choice within the platform, which we think is interesting.
Yeah, and well, one thing I would add is it's a big change, and we're not all the way through it. And I know some folks in the room have experienced some interruption or slight slowness of the site. We're working on it. Should be seeing better improvements, and we'll continue to improve it.
Okay, there's another one that I find really compelling and interesting, and it's called data lakes. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So a data lake, so everybody here moves data around, right? I mean, that's a big part of your job. And one of the things that often happens is as we're, say, taking data from an HRIS system and ingesting it into a PayScale system or one of the other systems that you may use, often we edit things out, we condense, we remove things that we think are not important and that we won't be using. And there's fidelity that's lost in that, and we lose the ability to have that information in the future. So data lakes are this notion of taking whatever the original is at any scale, ingest it, keep the original, and then make changes for your use today. And as you make changes over time, keep every version of everything that you've kept so that in the future, if you want to go back, roll back in time and go to an earlier version, you can do that. But also, you're preserving the fidelity of the original data, which will allow you to answer questions and do analytics in the future on things that you didn't know you might want to when you originally ingested the data or moved it from one system to another.
One of the reasons we think that's important is that most of the compensation world, until us about 1.5 years ago, had this model where you would upload new information, you would wipe out the old information, and you would go through your annual process. And that worked really well for market pricing, one time during the year. It does not work super well for things like trending over time, being able to correlate changes in pay internally, changes in market pay, to things like turnover. And that's sort of just beginning. We're thinking about these choices in the future for the long term. And I actually think one of the things we'll be able to do in the future is to enable a large body of workforce analytics. It's very early in that game, but that's where we're headed.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, a good example would be the gender pay gap. That is a question that people weren't asking earlier. And so as a result, many of our systems didn't capture gender data correlated with pay data. And so it's hard to go back in time and say, is this getting better or is it getting worse? And where might it be improving? And using this approach in the future, questions we don't even know we will want to ask, we'll be able to answer.
Okay, so there's two other things I already mentioned. It's PayScale Helix and Data as a Service. And Barnaby, can you talk about PayScale Helix?
Sure. So Helix is really us taking what I'll call garden variety data science tools. So this is really kind of the state of the art of artificial intelligence. And there are a bunch of open source packages that have been created by many different companies that companies like, say, Google, Amazon, Facebook use to be able to deliver the services that you all experience from them. We're using the same set of tools, but we're combining it uniquely with, I would say, 2 dimensions. One is the data that we have that no one else has. So we have some assets that are unique. As has been mentioned, we have PayScale.com where people can go and take our survey, and we've had tens of millions of people take that survey and do things like enter their title at the very beginning. We capture that, and then what we do is we map that to our 15,000 curated titles. And what that's done is it's given us this mapping from well over 10 million unique representations, abbreviations, misspellings, you have it, of people's titles to these unique titles, curated titles that we have. And so we're able to combine the data from that, as well as the data from all the job matching that we've done for our customers and that you've done for yourselves. So it's literally billions of data points. We combine that also with a lot of the ideas and philosophy around comp that we have to be able to start automating many of the more manual tasks that many of you have to do. And the idea is we'll free you up to do the really value-added strategy and putting out, sort of fires with humans, kinds of things that we can't really get computers to do yet.
But by the way, this is well before I joined PayScale. Mike and the team actually were doing this in 2005 and 2006. We were what is now called data science and machine learning. Wasn't really called that then. We actually started that, and that's what powered our comp model. And as Barnaby mentioned, what we've done is to take that notion and actually extend it to the way that companies match data, not just to PayScale, but also to survey data. And so you can see how you get this power of a platform effect where the more people participate, the more matches you have, the more accurate the matches become. And we've been doing this job matching specific project sort of internally for the last 2+ years, 2.5 years. And we are at a point now where the accuracy is high enough and the user experience is good enough that we're going to start exposing it to customers within the platform. And so you'll see that in 2019. It's going to be littered across multiple experiences. Ideally, we'll do it in a way where it's sort of seamless to you. It just works on your behalf. You don't have to adopt any new user experience, any new user interface. It just sort of works. Do you want to talk about the next 2 since you delivered them?
Yeah, so essentially being able to match jobs and really to be able to compare what you're doing with the market is kind of the key to making all of this work. And again, since we've done it for literally millions of matches over the years, what we did was we've taken all of that data and we've actually trained our models to behave like humans and to understand abbreviations and misspellings, and even things that are more complicated, like that an aquatic husbandry manager is a fish farmer. We've built that into an interface that also makes your job just easier. With a few clicks, you can really find what you're looking for and move through the process much more quickly. We've been using it internally because we do this on behalf of many of our customers, not all. And what we've been able to achieve by combining a better user interface and some of this automation is actually tripling the efficiency, the amount of work that that team has been able to do relative to before when it was more manual. So we're excited to start moving toward introducing that in the products for you. And you're actually going to see some demos of a number of ways in which we're using the platform and Helix from the rest of the team going forward.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
thanks,
definitely.
Barnaby.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, next up we have Heather Taylor, who's our Data as a Service product manager. Please welcome Heather. Please do, yeah.
Hi.
Thank you. She leads the team that's created our company source data product and some crowd cuts, which we'll talk about.
If any of you have met me, you know that I really love talking about data. And if any of you have been around PayScale for a long time, you know that we have a lot of data. We have the most compensation data out there. But from my perspective, it's not about how big your data is, but about what you do with your data. I'm hoping my goal of this is to tell you how we are using data in smart ways to get you to the right answer and to get you to the right answer faster with less friction. The first thing I'm going to tell you is that 10 years ago, back when we first started working with big data was not a thing. The internet exploded, and we can now do a lot more with data than we could before. Survey data has largely, when there are gaps and when there are holes, we have been using differentials and aging and weighting to sort of fill in the gaps, make the data work for us in ways that we need to. We no longer need to do that with the amount of data and with the amount of smarts that we have behind our data today. PayScale Helix is machine learning and artificial intelligence that powers all of our PayScale products. One of the most important ways that it powers it is through our compensation model. Our compensation model is made up of all of these different algorithms that are sophisticated and powerful on their own. As kind of Barnaby said, they're similar, they're being used across companies against like Google or Apple. They're all being used by data scientists, and PayScale's power is really that we use them together to be able to understand compensation in a really smart way. The one
you know, it dawns on me, I'm just looking at that list, there's like 0.2% of the people are like, awesome, you know.
Yeah, you want me to read it?
Those are some esoteric
You want me to tell you what they all are? No, I'm going to tell you what.
No, that's the last thing.
Yeah, if you guys have 45 minutes, I'll tell you what they all are. But I'm going to tell you what one is. The one that is most powerful that is called Bayesian statistics. It is an accepted statistical practice that uses prior knowledge, things you knew about the past that you have in your head to tell you and predict what you can do today. So for instance, who is taller based on these headshots? I don't know. I mean, do you guys know? I don't know. But I tell you, that's Teresa. Teresa plays volleyball. Chloe does gymnastics. Now who's taller? Yeah, Teresa's taller. That's prior knowledge. You just knew that. Kind of in the same way that you just know things about compensation. Our model just understands things. It has prior knowledge that makes our today's predictions better. Feed it with more knowledge. Teresa's mom is 6 feet tall. Chloe's mom is only 5 feet tall. Now who's taller? We have updated our prediction. So this is how we use Bayesian statistics in our compensation model. We take things that we know both from things we feed it because we know about compensation and things it learns from the data to really understand what you should be paying today. Okay.
Those women work on our data team, by the way.
Yeah, they're on our team, Teresa and Chloe. Teresa's here. You can say hi to her if you see her. OK, so you have heard about the PayScale platform from Dave, from Barnaby. One of the most powerful ways that we use our platform is to connect you to each other. By moving our products into a platform, we have created a data sharing community. And you are all part of that community. One of the ways that Barnaby said that your community is powerful is that you learn from each other's behaviors. You learn from how each other matches to then tell us how to match today. How you matched yesterday informs how you are matching today. That is really powerful that you can learn from your neighbor just because you're part of the PayScale community. The other ways that we are using platform to bring the community together is that you can share each other's pay practice. Who wants to know what their neighbor is paying? Turn to your neighbor and say, I definitely need to know what you're paying. And so this is our answer to that. By virtue of being a PayScale customer, you can find out what our 7,000 customers are paying. One of our main goals on the data team, as I had mentioned in the beginning, is to get you to the right answer faster. Our company source data project is one way that we are doing that really powerfully. Most surveys that you are in have a notion of submission. With our company source data, you don't have to submit. You're already uploading your HRIS data into your PayScale products. There is no notion of participation because we know how you've matched all of your jobs already, and we're not going to ask you to do it again. We also are producing this data quarterly, just right in your product with no friction. This is a perfect example of getting you to the right answer with no friction. About a year ago, we started this project, and we started with around 134 customers, and that was July of 2017. Our next release, we're going to have 1,000 customers. Yeah, clap. That was supposed to have a way bigger effect. That is a big deal. As of to date, we have around 1,500 customers that have given us permission and are letting us use their data. If you are not involved in this project, you should be. You should be knowing what your neighbor is paying, and you should be finding that out in a frictionless, easy way. So come find me if you are not a part of this project. Come find me in the expo hall, and I will sign you up. OK, the most powerful there's so many powerful things about it, but the most powerful thing about this is that a lot of the sources that you are using today outside of our crowdsourced data have trouble getting to really specific geography locations. We are combining the insights from our crowdsourced data with our employer-sourced data offering to really get to really specific geography cuts for you. So for instance, I did a little bit, I pulled some jobs. The yellow bars, that's what you can typically get in one of your traditional employer source surveys. The pink bars, that's us. It's a lot more. OK. The second thing, the second data source I'm going to tell you about very, very quickly, because I know we're like really running out of time. So the second data source I'm going to tell you about is Mercer. We have an alliance with them. About a year ago, we formed a partnership with them, and we started providing their data in our products, again, in a frictionless, seamless way. They just appear. You tell us that you want it, you pay some money, and then you get it. They are gold standard, they are trusted, and they are in your survey library. The third data set that I'm going to talk to you about is our crowdsourced data. This is what all of our customers have always had access to. It is a really, really powerful data source, and we are finding that the way we deliver it, allowing you to build your own jobs, build your own labor markets, define your positions down to the smallest detail is what a lot of our customers want. They want to roll up their sleeves and dive in and really understand a job. Not all of our customers want it that way. Some of them want the answer. Again, it's that idea. I just want the answer. I want the right answer now without work. And so we are answering that by bringing together our comp pros and bringing together data analytics and saying, OK, for these jobs, what is most important? We are curating the data set for you and delivering that to you already basically pre-cooked. You don't have to do the work. If you want to do the work, you can. If you don't want to do the work, you can go with crowd cuts, which I think is my next slide. Oh, this is why crowdsourced data is important. So I just did a session on skills, and crowdsourced data we have 60 million profiles. That's our breadth. Our depth really comes from about 30 or 40 different questions that people are answering. And one of the most important questions and the detail you can get with crowdsource, you can't get anywhere else. Skills. Skills really strongly affects your compensation, and it's really hard to know how and when and why, unless you came to my last session. Then you know how and when and why. But if your engineering manager comes to you and says, I need to pay my engineer more, they know Scala, and you're like, OK, like, I don't know, sure. I don't know anything about programming languages. You can come to our data set, and you can find out. I have priced for you a standard software engineer and listed for you the typical skills. I priced for you an advanced skilled software engineer and listed out the typical skills and told you the difference between their salaries. It goes from about $110,000 to $140,000. It's a big difference and a reason that you are potentially losing or not attracting talent. And this is a really powerful data source. This is where we are today with producing the curated data sets. We are continuing to roll out every job family, particularly ones that our customers want. OK, I'm going to demo.
Can I help? Thank you.
Yeah, does it just automatically go up there?
Yep.
OK, so this is your Insight Lab product. And the purpose of this demo is to help you understand how we are getting you to the right answer faster with less work. And so one of the things that we did, so this is a software developer. Oh, where did you go? OK, I'm going to start over. So one of the things that we did was link. So the work that Barnaby has done is really linking your internal job titles. OK, Seattle, come on. To our taxonomy. One of the work that we also do is linking our titles, our PayScale titles, to external titles, like your Mercer title or your Radford title. Sorry, I'm typing. OK, so you're trying to price your software developer. The first thing you do is, of course, it comes up with a perfect match. That is PayScale Helix at work. One of the important things that we have to do is, as a PayScale customer that's using Crowdsource Data, you really have the ability to define your level by entering in your year's experience. A lot of external surveys, you have to pick a level. So one of the things that we have worked on is mapping how you are defining a level via your compensable factors to how Mercer defines a level, or our company source data, or your Radford survey. So you have to go through and enter all your compensable factors, pick your job title, and then, like magic, you get 3 completely separate, completely different, powerful data sets by just doing the work once. This is the way that we're trying to get you to the right answer faster. One of the other things that we are working on, this is live today, one of the other things we're working on is coupling this idea of you pick one title and you get multiple surveys with the idea that Barnaby floated, that we're going to try and auto-match your jobs. You tell us what your job is. We should be able to put you in the PayScale taxonomy. And then you get from there to getting 3 sources of data. And with that, we can also use the crowdsource data to really fill in those compensable factors that help you define a job. So just by telling us what your jobs are, we should help you set you up for success in really being able to benchmark your jobs with the least amount of work possible. We floated this internally. I'm going to go back to the slide.
Sure.
With some of the internal folks that are doing this work that you guys do every day. And this was the reaction that we got. It's awesome. More data, less work. That is our goal.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
But by the way, we happen to know our data very well, and we know Mercer very well. That's where we're able to do the matching that she just said. We're actually agnostic. We'll match to anything as long as it speeds up the experience for you. And so I would expect over time that you will see us doing more and more and more of that in your experiences. OK, next up, I'd like to invite Chris Highfield, VP Product for MarketPay.
Hey, everybody.
So MarketPay is our experience for what tend to be larger companies that use dozens of sources of data, and they have usually a large source or a large team of compensation professionals, practitioners in the industry that have been doing this for a while. Another really common element is that these are international or multinational companies doing operations across multiple different complex areas. And Chris is the person that runs that product for us. So can you just give us a quick idea of the things that we sort of did in 2018?
Sure. I'm excited about telling you about what we've been doing. A lot of work on the MarketPay product. Of course, one of the goals that we have at PayScale is to build tools that will simplify your life. Will actually simplify your compensation life. Your other life, we have no control over. But in light of that, if we do our job well, then we free you up to do the meaningful work of compensation, right? The analysis and the strategy development and the compensation communication to your employees. And so some of the things that we focused on in this past year are streamlining the market pricing process through a tool called rules-based pricing, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. Making range development easier, so simplifying that range development process, and then also surfacing data insights from your data, and like survey utilization and comparison to the market. So things like that, those are the big ticket items that we've been working on in the past year.
Great. So Chris is going to now demo rules-based pricing. While he's pulling that up, in case you don't know, we've talked a lot about we have a relationship with Mercer. And one of the elements of that relationship is that we worked super hard with Mercer to migrate folks from an old survey management tool, which was called ePrism, which I'm sure a bunch of people in the audience are familiar with, over to MarketPay. As part of that exercise, we recognized we had some gaps from a product functionality perspective, and one of those was rules-based pricing. We knew that problem set very well because Mercer had solved a version of it previously, and what we tried to do was sort of a super improved version of rules-based pricing, and this is what Chris is going to show you.
Sure, sure. And that's exactly right. So as we saw the gap between ePrism and MarketPay, we wanted to, of course, fill that gap, and rules-based pricing was one of the tools that we did that. So imagine, if you will, you're a compensation manager. Now realize that's not a stretch for a lot of you in the audience, but work with me on that. So imagine you're a compensation manager and you're working for a technology company and you're going global. So you just purchased a facility in Canada. And what you want to do is do a quick market assessment of the jobs in that Toronto location. Rules-based pricing was built for just to do that type of exercise, to be able to quickly analyze your survey data and apply it to your jobs. In fact, I mean, that's quite simply what rules-based pricing does. It gives you the capability of systematically taking your survey data and applying it to the jobs that you have in your organization to quickly market price those jobs. So what I have
in a really real way, this is a different version of the same problem Heather just showed we solved using some software and some technology. It's that at large companies, most often comp practitioners actually know their jobs, they know their data, and they want a hands-on approach to be able to do this in sort of a systematic way relatively easily.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And with the rules-based pricing feature, there are 3 components that are involved in creating a set of rules. You know, first of all, you select the surveys that you want to use. And I've created a rule already that I'm going to walk you through. And this rule is based on the Mercer Canadian survey suite. So that's the set of surveys that I want to use. The second component that I would create in this set of rules would be the data cuts that are important to me. So I'm a technology company. The first type of data that I want the system to look for is high-tech data to market price my jobs. If that high-tech data doesn't exist, the second thing I want the system to look for is location-specific data. And if that doesn't exist, then I want the system to look for just the overall data in the survey. So I am able to really pinpoint the data that's important to me. And then the last component would be a measure of the threshold of data that I'm willing to use in that market pricing process. So real quickly, just to show you that, I can create a setting that says only show me data where there are at least 5 companies that submitted data for that record, and at least, in this case, 25 employees. If there's anything less than that, then skip over that data record and go to the next one.
So these are a series of rules you have that look at the attributes of the surveys. How many of these can you do?
You know, it's a great question. You're only constrained by the surveys that are in your survey library in the MarketPay system. So if you have 200 surveys, you can create a rule that utilizes all 200, and you know the data cuts within each of those surveys, as you can imagine, can be pretty extensive.
Cool.
So virtually unlimited. So now the next thing I'll do, I've got my set of my rules are created. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to select the jobs that I want to apply these rules to. And I have, in my Canadian location, I have 128 jobs. So I want to market price them all. And so I'm going to real quickly select all of those jobs. So I'm using a slide-out panel, a faceted search slide-out panel. This is one of those platform features that we've built that go across all of the different products. So this is an example of one of the things Barnaby was talking about earlier.
Thanks for saying that. I was supposed to say that. I missed it. What I was thinking about is we need a select all button right there.
We definitely need a select all button there. We will have that soon, and very soon. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and apply those rules. The system is going out to my survey library, and then it's coming back in a matter of seconds, and it has market priced 116 of my 128 jobs, which is kind of cool, right? And yeah, that's great. That's like, you know, one job in like a half a second. Every half a second we get a job. The great thing about this feature, though, is not only does it give me a summary of what I just did, it tells me how many of the jobs were not market priced and why they weren't market priced. So it tells me specifically why that rule didn't work for those particular jobs. Now, at this point, I can iterate on this market pricing exercise. So I can simply create another rule and use different surveys to see if I can market price the rest of those jobs. And that's where our company-sourced survey comes into play. So I'm going to create a second set of rules, and I'm going to use our PayScale company-sourced survey. And as a matter of fact, I've already done that. So the company-sourced survey is a great resource to fill gaps in your market pricing process. So if you have jobs that you can't market price because the data is not in your primary surveys, then you definitely should check out the company-sourced data. So if you're not using it, as Heather said, you should. So come talk to one of us, and we'll get you hooked up. So we're going to do the same exercise. We're just going to apply those jobs. I noticed that my purchasing jobs didn't get priced, so I'll just do a quick search on those. And again, we'll select it, and we'll apply. And now those 6 jobs are market priced. So very quickly, I've created 2 sets of rules, and I've market priced the bulk of my Canadian jobs using these rules. And now I can get on to the analytics and to the strategy development as well.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Can we go back to that? Yep.
Yeah. No.
So, what's next for market pay, Chris?
So 3 things that I would leave you with that we're working on for the balance of 2018 and in 2019. One that we're really excited about is the PayScale Helix functionality that Barnaby talked about. So giving users a way to quickly and easily match their job. So just to simplify that job matching process, we feel that when we do that, coupled with the rules-based pricing, it'll be a sense to market price a lot of jobs pretty much instantaneously. So that's the first thing. The second thing is what we're calling right now targeted manager access. And that's simply a way for you to give your managers access to reports that are meaningful to them without giving them access to the entire market pay system. And then the last thing is simply more analytics at your fingertips. So more ways to get to the data and get to the analytics that are important to you without having to generate reports and dashboards.
Cool. All right, thank you very much, Chris. Appreciate it.
Sure thing. Thank you. Thanks, y'all.
So we have another call for beta users, and we had a lot of interactions with customers around a Tableau integration that we did last year. And specifically when it comes to pay equity reporting, it turns out that one of the things you need to do that very well is the ability to do multivariate statistical analysis. And the native Tableau application does not have that in there, so we actually built some capability within that so that you can do this type of analysis. We also built a starting set of reports that you can access and use, and it does 3 things. The first is just basic gender pay equity, and what we used are the UK guidelines, largely because those are simple and pretty straightforward and not controversial. And then we did 2 extra things. One is that exact same body of rule set, but looks at it from a job family perspective. And then another one is same rules, but then down to the employee level. And the reason that's important is because if you're going to close the gap, you actually have to know the size of the gap down to the employee level. That example that Mike used earlier about Salesforce, we don't think most companies are not going to be able to close the gap in a 1-year basis. This is something you're probably going to have to be continually doing. But what you will be able to know is, as I'm closing the gap, to what extent is that happening over time, and what should my next step be? So these will actually be real humans building the actual report for you. So it's a for-pay that'll have associated statement of work. And we have a beta opportunity. And if you're interested, please see the MarketPay folks in the expo. Okay, next up, I'd like to have Alex Armstrong, Senior Director of Platform. So Alex, Insight Lab's been out a little less than 2 years, and the growth has been pretty significant. We have about 400 customers. What have you noticed about that?
Yeah, no, it's true. We've grown a lot in the last year even. So I'd say the difference in PayScale customers that use Insight Lab versus MarketPay especially comes down to 3 things: size, and size. First is the size of the company. They span the gamut of sizes. So our smallest Insight Lab customers, about 11 or 12 employees, and our largest is well above 20,000. So the software has to handle all of that range across the board. The second is the size of the team that manages compensation at those organizations. So they tend to have a team focused on comp, but there are only 1 to 3 people. And so they need a lot of support from the software especially in order to do their jobs. And the third thing is the size of their data set. So they tend to use, in addition to the PayScale Crowd and PayScale Company data that comes in Insight Lab out of the box, use 1 to 2 external surveys. So about 3 to 4 surveys when it's all said and done.
That's great. And I know we've had a lot of innovation going on in lab. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, a ton. I'm really happy with all the work that's been done by our various teams to provide value to our Insight Lab customers. So a couple highlights from the last year. The first is job collaboration, which Carica is going to talk about in a second. That's really allowed managers in HR to get on the same page further upstream as they're trying to figure out how to price jobs effectively. So if you haven't used it yet, do it. It's awesome, I promise. Second is company source data. Heather talked a lot about our data and the power that you get with that data. And so now company source data comes right alongside Crowdsource in Insight Lab. It's awesome. They're 2 completely different data sets, so 2 completely different sets of strengths that you can leverage now out of the box with Insight Lab. Third is international currency. So this time last year, Insight Lab supported pricing jobs in the US and Canada. And now we support pricing jobs in over 50 countries around the world. So wherever you operate, chances are we can support pricing in those locations. And last but not least is the data science and machine learning that you've been hearing a lot about today from Barnaby, from Heather. Getting things into the product like survey suggestions, skills, certifications, smart search. All of those technologies are already starting to trickle and find their way into Insight Lab. And we're going to continue to roll those out through the rest of the year and into 2019.
Awesome, thank you very much. Okay, so today we're going to talk about job-based ranges. Do you want to describe sort of how this came about?
Yeah, definitely. So Dave mentioned this customer advisory board that we do where we hand select 20 or 30 of folks like you to help guide us, to give us insight into the talent markets they compete in and help us look out 12 to 24 months to make sure we're doing the right things in our products. So in the conversation last year at our CAB meeting before conference, we observed a really interesting conversation around the use of grade-based ranges, and heard some of our, especially larger enterprise customers, talking about shifting away from using grade-based ranges, which planted a seed in our head. And so we did what we always do. We went and looked at the data and saw some things that we would expect and some things we wouldn't expect. The thing that we did expect was that as company size grows, we see a higher proportion of customers using grade-based ranges. No surprise there, right? But what surprised us was when you look between 2011 and 2018, a massive shift away from grade-based ranges across the board in all of those customer size segments. So this data is from our CVPR. You can have access, you can go look at this yourself. But that really, really surprised us. So the question is why? So we asked a lot of you in the audience that had moved away from grade-based ranges to help us understand what themes might be at play. And we identified 3. The first is around data, and specifically constraints that existed in 2011 that aren't as present today. You've heard a lot about data and how much data is available, and the use of grade-based ranges to compensate for a lack of data isn't as necessary today as it has been in the past. Second is around flexibility and precision. And so especially with fast-moving jobs, companies wanted the ability to be super precise with the grades that they assign to those jobs, and also have the flexibility to move those grades when those jobs moved without having to upset their overall global structure. And the third thing was really interesting, was around culture. So the thing that they were noticing in their organizations were unintended consequences of using a grade-based structure that created kind of a toxic environment around compensation. And the example they gave was that when they tried to have these open, transparent conversations about comp that we've been talking about all day today, the conversation focused on the grade itself. I'm an 8, I want to be a 9, rather than were you paid fairly? Were you paid for the skills that you brought to your organization? And so they moved away from grade-based ranges to get away from that problem. So 3 really interesting problems that they just bubbled up out of conversations with all of you.
Great, you want to show us?
Yeah, let's do it. So to kind of set the stage here, imagine you're a healthcare company in sunny Florida. You're having trouble competing for and retaining talent. And so you partner with PayScale, you load up all of your data, you price your jobs, and you log into the system. And this is the first thing you see. So for those of you that haven't used Insight Lab, what you're seeing at the top of the screen here is basically a comp ratio chart by job family. So bubbles represent jobs. Size of bubble represents the number of employees in that job. And the further you are away from the middle, the further you are away from the strategy you've defined for the pricing of those jobs. And so what you're looking for here is outliers. You want things kind of in the middle, and if there's things further out, you want to ask a question about why that might be true. So you can see over on the right-hand side of the screen, we have these two bubbles out here, one big one and one little, and we can click in to get a little bit more detail about what might be going on. So we definitely see something happening. And three possibilities, right? One, we've mispriced this job, but we've looked at the data, we feel pretty good about it. Second is that we're just overpaying employees. But again, look, this is what we're having to pay to attract that talent, so we don't think that's the problem. And the third might be some other macroeconomic factor affecting the talent market that you're competing in, which happens to be the case here. There's an incumbent competitor who's really being aggressive at trying to attract people in these specific jobs, and we've had to change our practices to compensate for that, to react to that increased pressure. And so what we're going to do, because what's happened is our strategy's shifted organically. It wasn't intentional, but we've had to do this. So what we want to do now is align our strategy to that reality so that when we go to those charts on the homepage, we understand that we're actually doing what we want to do. So how we're going to accomplish this is going into our job-based ranges. And we have one model right now that's basically targeting the 50th percentile with a 30% spread for all of our jobs. And what we're going to do is create a new one. We're going to take out those case manager jobs that we just saw. And we're going to propose that we target the 75th percentile for those. And so at this point, we can actually click into all the way down to the employee level to see what the impact is on those individual people, understand what the comp ratio is before and after, as well as the dollars that are necessary to bring all of those employees up to the minimum, at least the minimum of that proposed grade. So if everything looks good, we're going to apply that model for those ranges to those jobs. And then when we go back to our dashboard, we can see that bubble moves back closer to the center line to reflect that we're actually closer aligned to the strategy we've now established for those jobs.
Cool. One of the things I think that's interesting about that is that you see the list of the employees, so you know the actual cost of the change before you decide to actually make the change. You can contemplate it, analyze it, talk about it with other folks, but down to the employee level.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Can we go back to the deck? So you've got some, oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah, beta. Lots of betas.
Is this live right now?
It's getting there. So we're actually running a beta program now. If you're using Lab and are interested, head across the hall to the expo and talk to those folks over there. They'd love to sign you up, so you can just kick the tires and see if this might work for you and your organization.
Great. And then what's next for Lab?
A couple things. Really excited about the work that's coming up in Q4 in 2019. So the first thing that's going to happen is a two-way sync. And for our team folks in the audience, you're going to be really excited about this. But an automatic two-way sync between Insight Lab and Team, now that they're both plugged into the platform. What that means is when you make a change in Lab, that change is automatically reflected in Team without you having to do any additional work. No downloading and uploading to make sure those things are in sync. And then same thing going back the other direction. So that'll be huge. Really excited about that. And then moving on, just other ways to get data into the system. So leveraging APIs, flat files, however it is that you want to get data into the system, we want to make that easier for you. So it's not, it doesn't take as much time as it does today. And last but not least are enabling those feature bundles that Dave referenced earlier, where customers are going to have the ability to create custom packages of features that make sense for them at this point, and then add on as time goes on.
The other thing I would say is, so we have an announcement with SAP. We signed an agreement. We're going to do an integration of them with their SuccessFactors product. And there are two other companies that we're working with. We're in various stages. And if you're interested in participating in betas for those as well, please raise your hand at the expo.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you for sticking with us. We're down to the home stretch here. Next up is Carica, Leslie, Senior Product Manager for Teams.
Hi. Thanks. All right, so you have heard a lot of great things today about all the work that my colleagues are doing to help you with getting the right data, the right matches, and using a lot of sophisticated features to help you with your compensation strategy. But like we've been talking about all morning, none of that matters if you're not able to communicate it. And so I'm here to talk about our products that are geared at helping you empower your managers to give input into those compensation decisions so that they can help make better pay decisions later. We have a lot of interesting things to share with you today. I know for many of you who were here last year, we showed you a preview of our job collaboration feature, which is designed to help get that input from your managers about the jobs that they have and they know really well within their organization. So I'm excited to show you a little bit about what we've accomplished this year when it comes to helping you give access to your managers to help get that input. Let's just imagine for a moment, again, Heather talked about that engineering manager that comes into your office. You know, they're busy, they're stressed, they have 40 employees reporting to them, and they want to give you that feedback about the job to make sure that they can attract and retain the right talent within their organization, within their team. And imagine for a minute that they don't have to come to your office. Maybe they just pick up their phone, wherever my phone is here. So they pick up their phone, and they're able to look in a couple of clicks and get all the information about their team seamlessly, easily. I can see all of my employees. I can look into the details about how they're paid, where they are in the range. And then most importantly, let's say, for example, when Heather was talking about needing to get more information or needing to get a new job priced for a particular position, instead of giving feedback to you in your office, they can come in here, review that job, see the range for the position, see the market data you're sharing with them, you're sharing your strategy, and then they can give you that feedback on what they need to get the right talent in the door. Let's say they need to up the years of experience. Heather was talking about some of those important skills. They can give you that information because they know the job's best. I was talking actually with an engineering manager earlier this week about how some of those AWS skills are super critical and important. And so they can give you all that information, provide you with comments, tell you what they think, and submit that feedback, and that comes directly to you in Insight Lab.
You know, somebody asked me about this. Right now you were showing market pay in there. Does everybody have to have that experience, or the actual salary amount or dollar amounts there? Does that?
There is a way to turn the pay off for employees so that you didn't need to share, if you don't want to share with your managers what the employees are paid, yeah, you can take that out.
Cool. One of the things I think that's very cool about that is that we've taken all of this skills, certification, title information, and now it's easily accessible by managers. Because of that, we actually think it works very well for Insight Lab customers and also for Market Pay customers. We don't have current integration plans with Market Pay, but if anybody's interested, please let us know.
Yeah, definitely.
And then you have another thing you want to show?
Yeah, so as far as where we're headed, and Alex has been talking a little bit about this already, you know, we're really excited to be able to bring all of the job collaboration features that we have for managers into our PayScale Team product, which for many of you in the audience, you already use PayScale Team today to help manage that pay increase cycle for your organization. So imagine that you can see all of that in one place. So this, again, is that engineering manager coming into the system, being able to see the employees, the jobs. They know exactly what their budgets are. They know how they can come in and make decisions. This is the new UI that we are building and going to release in 2019 to help you have those conversations with your managers about making those good, important pay decisions. We're bringing in pay history. And let's say, for example, that manager wants to go in and promote someone to that new job that they have. They can see all of the details that they've already provided to you with that feedback that they gave you, and they can make that promotion decision very easily. So this is where we're headed in terms of new features, new functionality that we want to be able to bring into PayScale Team to help enable and empower your managers.
Cool. Very cool. Can we go back to that? Great. All right, do you want to talk roadmap a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So talked about the unified experience that we're planning to deliver in 2019. We're also, and I know Andrea talked about this in the keynote this morning, we also want to be able to provide you with the way not to make comp an event, a single event once a year, but to allow you to have ongoing, anytime pay changes with your employees to help be smarter about your pay strategy. So that's what we're excited to do. And then hopefully later next year, we're going to broaden to some other experiences for executives, recruiters, and maybe employees as well.
That was another thing that came out of CAB yesterday, which we've heard rumblings about, but we happened to get in a pretty deep conversation. So we have desire to do this. We're going to go through a step where we actually understand what is the problem we're trying to solve there, what are the needs of the users, but hopefully you'll see something at next conference. So great. Thank you very much, Carica.
Thanks.
And we want some beta users. Sorry. That was my fault. And you can get information in the expo across the hall, or of course, chat with Carica. Okay, I just want to end with one more mention of the platform. One of the things that's very exciting about this ability to bundle and unbundle features is that it allows the capability Carica just talked about. So you don't have to have, but you can choose to have job collaboration. You don't have to have team for making pay changes, but you can choose to do that. And having a unified experience means managers only have one login. One day they may not have the ability to make pay changes, but the next day when you choose to have that available, it just shows up in their account. They don't have to go through a whole new process. And that's part of the vision that we have for that product. Also, participation is super big. And then the final one for us are the data lakes, which we really think sets folks up for the future. None of that matters, though, unless you can actually get the value that you've created out into the hands of your managers and employees. And for us, one of the things that we think sort of is the ultimate sort of value driver, although we know not everybody's ready to go this sort of step, is to literally share this down to the employee level. So Tim Lowe, our SVP of marketing, talks a lot about pay brand. A very simple way I'd have you think about that is you just need, this is a marketing piece, it's a messaging piece because this is about perception. You need some message that has to be your message that's aligned with your culture. You heard some great examples this morning of that. Very, very cool stuff. And then you need to provide them a little bit of personal context. So things like ranges for their job, median pay for other people like them in their job, where they are in that job, and then have a conversation with them about, well, what has to happen for them to move up into the range? What has to happen for them to get to the top of the range and then go to the next job? It's really important. All of the research says that having that conversation about potential for the employee is the ultimate thing that will keep them around and engage at the company. Great. So with